Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where we discuss the challenges of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that phrase even means. I'm Kane, and joining me today to chat man stuff are Ryan and Maddie. Now, gents, this week I was reading a few stats around obesity, primarily obesity in children, but it got me thinking about BMIs, and I ran my stats, my height, my weight through a BMI calculator, and I got you both to do that before we recorded this evening. So, who wants to volunteer their BMIs?
I'll start. So I slotted in at 23.9, which is just, I think, between 18.5 and 24.9 is healthy. But in lieu of having a chat about this topic, I did just get back from a run. So I think that was inspired by what we're talking about.
Matthew?
Dropped down a bit, Ryan, from your run. I came in as well at 23.9. So I'm looking at the little picture at the moment, and I'm just the south side of the overweight line where it begins. So,
did you go for a run as well?
No, I didn't go for a run, and I've been eating a lot of garbage this weekend. So maybe that's pushed it up a little bit. Slowly as I get older, I've been noticing it going a bit northward.
I had a piece of chocolate, and on our way in at 83 kilos and 182 centimeters tall, and have a BMI of 25.05, meaning I'm technically overweight by about 0.05 of a kilogram. Sorry, about 0.5 of a kilogram. So, yeah, I've always been sort of this height and weight. I've not really fluctuated too much. When I played sport, depending on positions on the sporting field, my weight kind of varied depending on how many weights I was doing and things like that. But I've been broadly this weight for the last sort of 15 years, and having looked at the BMI, which is body mass index, I've seen that I'm half a kilo overweight. So tomorrow I'm back on the beans and egg or broccoli and chicken diet, guys. But Ryan, as a physio, tell us a little bit more about BMI and what that means and how accurate it can be or may be, or whether it's the guide for people.
Yeah, it's a good question. So BMI is a very commonly used, measurement for healthy weight. It is very, also old, but like I said, it's very commonly used, but it is highly flawed in that what we know is that muscle weighs more than fat, and a much better measurement of weight is actually your body fat index, although that involves a proper assessment, and it's much harder than just putting in your height and your weight and then spitting out a number. But if you think about the BMI and sort of your stats there, Kane, at 182 and 83 kilos, if you think of professional athletes, most footballers who are 182 centimeters are 85, 86 to 90 kilos. So technically they're all overweight, and we know that they're professional athletes. So the BMI is sort of just a good quick snapshot, but it's definitely flawed in that it will say overweight on people that really probably aren't. That being said, you put that into context with other things such as actually how you're feeling, how your clothes feel, all those kind of things. You sort of know whether you are or aren't, I guess.
But what I take away from that, Ryan, is I'm ripped like an AFL footballer.
I don't know if I'd say that, but look, knowing you, I definitely wouldn't be going on any crash diets or anything crazy for yourself. You're certainly not overweight. So it sort of goes to show that it can be a bit of a flawed system, but it is a very commonly used system. And like all things with numbers that I really like, or that we like in healthcare, is that it's not necessarily the number that we worry about too much if we're looking at changing something. It's actually how much change we get from that baseline number. So if you get 24, say, and you're wanting to trim up and reduce your body fat index and all these kind of things, which can have follow-on effects for a lot of things, then what we're looking is the percentage change where you can drop down from that number, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess the context of us talking about this was, I was reading a report this week, and it's a slightly old report, sort of 1 or 2 years old. They're saying that 1 in 4 Australian children aged between the age of 2 and 17 were overweight or obese, and that trend is only getting worse. And obesity actually costs Australia, according to a PwC report, up to $8.6 billion a year. So, guys, why are people, and I guess children as well, getting bigger and
I guess I might jump in there, having 3 kids of my own, and seeing a lot of kids at schools. I think there's a couple of factors that I see. One being convenience for parents in terms of what they send their kids to school with in their lunch boxes. So obviously back in the day, we used to, have our piece of fruit, a sandwich, maybe, speaking for myself here, maybe a packet of chips, biscuit, etc. But we were outside, most of the day when we went in the classroom, running to maximum health, or playing football, etc., etc. So a lot of exercise there. Whereas these days, I think whilst kids are outside during school hours, when they come home, they're sort of either just crashing in front of the TV, or even on weekends, you've got the iPads, or I think the outdoors isn't as, as prevalent as what it was maybe in my generation at least. And in terms of, what the kids are getting in their lunch boxes these days, you can go to the shops and it's all just packaged. It's easy. It's, and a lot of parents maybe don't have the time. If both parents are working, there's a lot of stress involved in, getting 5, lunches packed every week. And if you've got multiple kids, it's, double that, triple that. So I think they're probably the 2 reasons actually, convenience and exercise.
Well, the thing with that, like fast food when we were kids, or when I was a kid anyway, was either McDonald's, maybe Red Rooster. If you're really lucky in your area, there might have been a Chinese restaurant. There's a lot more sort of convenient food that people can get now, and a lot of healthier options as well. So that sort of food and convenience is an interesting one, in that if you choose the right options now while having fast food, inverted commas, or takeaway, there are better options out there, but people still seem to I guess, head towards fast food as being a treat and get something which would be traditionally considered bad for them as well. So if you choose wisely, I do think there's plenty of good options out there, but maybe people just don't, because it's maybe not as easy, or it is a treat when you have it.
Yeah, that's right. It is a treat when they have it. And I know a lot of the schools these days or even daycare actually, are sort of monitoring what the parents are sending. So they'll go through the children's lunchbox and they'll toss to the side what they don't want the kids to have, and they'll let them eat the rest. And they'll generally send home what they call contraband food, I guess, back to the parents, and let them know that this kind of stuff is not what we have here. So we're pretty good on that kind of stuff. Like Kim generally does a lot of research into what kind of foods, or recipes that will fill their bellies up for longer, or low GI, and try not to send too much packaged food. So it's a conscious decision to try and give your kids the best sort of energy they need throughout the day, rather than letting them.
Have you had anything sent home?
We have a couple of times, yeah. And they've been homemade things as well. So whether or not because when we do make homemade things, just because of some intolerances within our family, it can look like something that it's not. Like maybe a chocolate brownie might be made of cacao, or it might be healthy.
Organic cacao.
Yeah, organic. Instead of sugar, there's maple syrup or something like that. But yeah, I mean, to the untrained eye, you'd look at that and go, "No, that's a chocolate brownie. We're sending that back." But apart from that, the only thing we really get sent back is if my mum baked something that had some peanuts in it, and that didn't get through the system, so that got sent back. But
allergies is a whole nother episode. I know we'll touch on that at another time. Ron, do you have anything to add around obesity and what people should eat? Because you're a very fit fellow.
I try to be, although I'm definitely probably fitter from the physical activity side. I certainly like a cheeky pizza and that from time to time. But look, I think just touching on what you were saying, the cost of obesity and working in healthcare, it is astronomical, and it unfortunately is only getting worse. Well, I think a lot of it, food's a huge component of it, but I think food's more of a component when you're an adult. With younger people, I think the rise of obesity is due to lack of physical movement. So, like, as humans, we're one of the most engineered, efficient, I guess, organisms or animals or whatever we happen to be, on the planet for movement, in that we can swim, we can jump, we can run, we can walk, we can crawl, we can do all these different things that if you pointed to sort of any other animal on the planet, they couldn't do the combinations of things that we can do. I think the problem now is, especially with schools and that kind of thing is, and it was happening towards the end of me finishing school, which is still a while ago now, but I've noticed that it's only gotten worse, is they've taken away things like compulsory PD. They've taken away sports carnivals used to be, a week-long thing when I was in primary school or whatever. Now they're a day thing, and it's really if you do sport on the outside, and we'll get you to then represent the school. But I was noticing, especially in high school towards me sort of finishing, was that compulsory PD and physical activity was just not something that was done standardized anymore. And sort of talking to my parents, because I mean, as you said, I'm fit, so I really liked PD, unlike a lot of people, and I got pretty pissed off with it. And my parents at the time were pretty surprised, because they were like, yeah, we had standard PD up until year 12. So I think that, plus the influx of technology and what Matt was saying, in that we also live in more compressed urban environments now. So the suburbs today are not suburbs before, where they've got townhouses instead of houses, and we're living in very condensed and compressed environments that also don't facilitate as much movement. So I think that, plus technology and the addiction that we have to technology, and then the lack of, I guess, government directive to schools, which I think I'm very disappointed in the government for taking away so much PD. And by that, I mean, basically movement. I think those are a big combination of factors, and then busy lives of two parents working to afford, the realities of the world today. Combine all that means kids just aren't moving the body the way that they are. And even when I was treating clinically, there's now conditions that have come out in the last 5-10 years that are teenage specific, that are all based on iPhones and technology, and generally because kids just don't move and have the flexibility, and they don't develop the coordination. So I think the metabolism doesn't get stimulated by the movement, and then we wind up in this big cycle. And then, especially if they're eating bad food, it's a really nasty ending, I suppose.
Yeah, so we're eating too much food, which is maybe the wrong type of food, and on the flip side, not exercising, and it's calories in, calories out equals, weight going on. The kid thing's such an interesting thing. I remember pretty much every single day as a primary school kid, we'd finish school, we'd come home, we'd have a quick snack, and that could be anything really. And then we'd be at a mate's house doing something, playing something outside. Like I remember playing, backyard football and backyard cricket, like constantly, pretty much 5 days a week, and then all day on a weekend. It just doesn't happen anymore. And it wasn't even something which was sort of supervised by parents. You just go, okay, I'm going over to my mate's place across the road. You'd kind of be able to walk across the road because it's suburban life. You'd play.
Or you ride your bike.
Or you'd ride your bike. We used to have bike races up and down the street. I used to pretend I was far up because I was weird. Other people probably, it did other sort of things. But like you'd play every single day, and it was physical activity, not sitting in front of a computer game playing Xbox or something like that. Went to the library yesterday to borrow a few books for the little fella, because we found that if we borrow books, he'll read them for a couple of weeks, we can take them back, get more, and he really enjoys that process of getting books and then being excited about them and returning them. They had a computer game there. Like two kids were sitting there, like young kids there, playing bloody, whatever Mario is these days, the equivalent of that. I'm like, that never existed back when I was a kid. But like we just go out and play outside for hours. It just doesn't seem to happen anymore. Maddie, as a dad to sort of two girls of that sort of age, did your girls get out and play with just with mates?
Not as much as what you just described then, Kane. Even though we do live in suburbia and we've got a massive big park across the road, they generally will come home and they'll have a bit of play in the backyard, and then guilty here, they do jump on the iPad or watch a bit of TV. And that's either because, Kim's trying to get dinner ready and we've got the little baby at the moment. But on the flip side, we do, when we're as a family on the weekends, we generally try to get out as much as we can, whether it be swimming, playing across the road in the park, even running around, doing that kind of stuff. So whilst they are not doing as much as they probably should be after school, we do try and make up for that a lot on the weekend.
Yeah, well, I'm not knocking tablet time and TV time, because there's always a time and a place for that. And we watched cartoons and when we were kids, and I remember a couple of weeks ago we were discussing Astro Boy and Dragon Ball Z, whatever the hell that is, and Saved by the Bell. So there's still a time and a place for that. And being able to sit a kid down in front of that for sort of 15 or 20 minutes while you're preparing dinner or you're doing X or Y, it's good for the mental health of the parent as well. So there's balance, but the balance seems to have tilted away from the activity side and tilted more towards that life in front of a screen for kids. And it's different, and it's clearly something which is contributing to childhood overweightedness and obesity.
Yeah, and I think it's good to point out that it's not a case of, back in my day, we didn't have the technology, because some of the really cool stuff that's happening healthcare wise is that we're using Nintendo Wii's for pediatric treatments. We're starting to use virtual reality. I mean, I'm really hoping that VR is up and running by the time that I have kids, because then even if they do want screen time, I can be like, that's fine, put you in a room and still get you moving. But it's not, I don't think it's so much the technology. I think it's just, it seems that sport or just physical activity or those kind of things are just, we're continually getting more time poor. And that's one of the things, like we've touched about, or we're going to touch about, sleep is a pretty important thing. Physical activity and sleep seem to be those levers that, whether it's children or adults, and I'm seeing this a lot in the adult space, they're the levers that get pushed down to go, I'll do it later today, and then it never happens, or I'll do it tomorrow and then it doesn't happen. So they're kind of what we're, I guess, foregoing. And the compounding effect of that, treating the other scope of the spectrum, men's health issues around that 40 to 60 year of age bracket, especially around obesity, usually because fellas have stopped playing sport, but they haven't stopped drinking the beers that came with football, are really big. And it's simply a fact of, I can't remember this because I've got to go back to my uni days or something like that, but so don't quote me on it, but it was something silly like for every extra kilo that you gain around the stomach area, when you walk, it puts something like 5 extra kilos of force through your knees and ankles, and when you run, it's like 10 extra kilos. So if you're 10 kilos heavier than what you were 10 years ago, the amount of forces that go through your knees and ankles, and we're starting to see more and more people at an earlier age do things like total knee replacements, which is probably where that $8 billion cost that they're talking about comes in. But it's sort of obviously I can get on a bit of a rant about this because I'm quite involved in it, but it is very worrying how we sort of seem to forego our physical and mental health in lieu of life's busyness, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's hard to prioritize sleep and activity, like you mentioned before at the start of what you're saying there, before kids and before doing this and before doing Y. But that's a really important aspect which people neglect. And then just pairing that with eating reasonably well, and you can at least maintain your weight, if not maybe lose a little bit here and there. And that's really important for your longer term health. And especially if you've got kids, you want to be around for as long as you can.
At the end of the day, one of the things that worries me about getting older, especially as a guy, is we sort of, and I think the women do it so much better than we do, is they age usually much better than we do, because they really keep, they really keep a focus on feeling good. Whereas I think guys get to a point, and it's different for a lot of guys, but I sort of see it around that late 30s, early 40 mark, where they go, all right, I'm sort of over the hill. I can kind of expect that, the dad bod's a big thing, and instead of the 6-pack, I'll have the keg around the belly. And that sort of just becomes expected and the norm. And then they use age as a bit of an excuse, and a little bit hypocritical because I am still 28 saying that. But some of the people that I do get to see working in health and treating and that kind of thing, and also that I run Spartans with. I mean, I ran Spartan with a guy who was 61 and he absolutely smashed me. So there's definitely, age isn't just the factor. I think it just goes, it becomes a bit too hard, and I'll sort of let it go. But what's really worrying is the compounding factor, where you go, okay, well, I've gained a kilo or 2 this year, and then that becomes your norm, and then you gain a kilo or 2 next year, and then 5-10 years down the track, you're 10 kilos heavier than what you were, and the effect that it has on your low back, your knees, and everything like that. And then people usually wind up and come and see me, basically.
Well, it starts out when you're a kid, though. Like you were saying before, they've taken physical education out of schools or out of a lot of schools anyway. It's that routine and that consistency of doing it and having some sort of activity each day or each week. Taking that out of schools, that sets the routines for kids for the rest of their lives as well. Like it's those routines that you set up when you're a kid, which is super important. So I know, Maddie, we've spoken before, and your girls do all sorts of different sports. So you're setting a really good routine for them and eating healthy outside of the old sort of, you know, superfood brownies that you send into childcare, which get sent back. So I think you're doing a really good job of laying the groundwork for your girls and little Sammy to be healthy kids when they grow up.
Yeah, I just wish I'd apply the same, methods to myself. It's funny because when the girls get their lunches, or Kim makes the majority of lunches, but they get this lovely spread of, sandwiches and cucumbers and carrots and fruits and, maybe a little biscuit and, and I got to work with a white bread sandwich, ham and cheese ×2. And I just think to myself, oh, I really got to start making more of an effort here because, like you said, Ryan, before, when you do get to that age, I mean, I'm 35 at the moment, and it's a lot harder to sort of maintain that weight. I've always managed to be within 70 and 80 kilos, but at the moment I'm 83, and you can just sort of feel a little bit of a sort of spare tire around the tummy. And even though I run consistently, I'm just not, making the right food choices to sort of maintain that flat tummy I once upon a time had. I don't know if you feel the same way about that, Kane, but I've got a real big problem with Coca-Cola. It was Coke Zero, now onto the Diet Coke, and I can sort of stop, and after a couple of days, I'm fine, and I don't get back on it, and I can go for a month without it. But at the moment, I'm in the the smashing it sort of phase, for less than a better word, and I'm pumping down a couple of DCs every day. So that's my little weakness. But what you said before, Kane, about setting routines for kids, absolutely, that's 100% correct. So in my eldest daughter's class at school, they cut back a PE lesson, and she was pretty devastated about that as well, because that was a great chance for them to sort of learn at that age, learning the cognitive skills with all kind of ball sports and things like that. So for them to lose that was a bit of a bummer. But we try and do a park run every Saturday, and just try and a swimming lesson at least twice a week for the kids, just so they get into that routine of it's not just home, school, and that's it. There's all these other kind of things to get out and do.
Yeah, I guess we're lucky enough to do a bit of co-parenting most of the time with our little fella, and my default is to take him out and do something, because if we just sit around inside, I know I get bored and then I end up looking at a phone, which is bad because I'm not engaged with him, and it doesn't happen too much, but like, we run a small business as well, so just trying to keep on top of emails and things like that. So my default is to go and do something. It might just be walking around, a shopping centre at Bunnings, or it might be walking around Aldi because he likes that. So we just try to do something outside. He loves playing out in the garden now, so it's great. We roll around and do things like that. We're lucky enough to have a beach fairly close, so we'll go and do that. But they're my default ones because that's what I kind of grew up doing. And I don't know, again, Maddie, like you've got girls who go to places and hang out with other girls and other boys. I remember when I was a kid in our primary school group, there was probably only one person within our 22 or 23 person class who I would have considered overweight, and that's because his parents worked at the Cadbury chocolate factory. So, it's like Willy Wonka, you would be. But is it more prevalent when you see sort of kids coming in and out with your girls that they might be maybe a little bit overweight?
Yeah, that ratio's definitely risen, Kane. Whilst it's not huge, but there is some. Well, it's when you're talking about kids, it's hard to really call them overweight, I guess. But their frame is a lot larger than, say, the average kid in the class. And you really just got to look at the parents, and you can tell that they come from a family of large people, and whether or not those parents don't have the same want or need, they don't prioritize getting out with their kids, maybe because it's just too hard for them. Maybe they're just too large. They can't, get around and run around with their kids, or they, can't get to a swimming lesson or park run, all that kind of stuff. And maybe, again, bad food choices on their behalf.
Yeah, raising kids is hard. It's really hard. So we're certainly not criticizing parents in this instance. It's a really hard thing to do. And there's a lot of times where you're like, I just don't have the energy to do that or to do this. But it's just trying to even set those routines at a young age, if you can, for a couple of years, that hopefully the kids can sort of carry forward. And there's lots of shortcuts we all take as parents. But just setting those routines young, and hopefully they'll carry through for the rest of the kids' lives.
What about cost of food, like eating healthy versus unhealthy? I mean, I know these days advertising is flooded with $3 meals from these fast food chains versus actually going to the supermarket, buying the same ingredients, say for maybe a hamburger or a pizza. Domino's is throwing out $5 pizzas. Could you go to the supermarket and buy the exact same ingredients and do it yourself?
That's a really good one. As three gentlemen here, so cooking wise, could you execute on a homemade pizza or a homemade hamburger? Because I think you could meet an equivalent price point, like mince and a little bit of iceberg lettuce and a tomato is basically the same as a Big Mac, albeit without some special sauce. But could you both execute on like a homemade burger or homemade pizza at a similar pricing point?
You could definitely execute on a similar pricing point, and you pick the two things that I can comfortably be like, yep, I can cook that. So I appreciate that. But it's the time, it's the effort, it's what you say there, Matt, and there is actual evidence and studies and research out there that is it is harder to eat healthier. Sorry, it is more expensive to eat healthier. And it has been proven because it is very easy to go through Macca's and whatnot and get a $5 meal. But also when you do go to the supermarkets and those sort of things, it's the cheaper hamburger patties. Well, let's just say that we don't even do mince and properly make it. The cheaper hamburger patties versus the more healthier, I guess, organic or whatnot hamburger patties. The cheaper ones are much worse for you than the healthier ones. The cheaper sausages are much worse for you than healthy ones. So all those kind of things. And then the time factor and the convenience factor of all the processed food that you can pick up for dirt cheap. It is certainly easier, and there's definitely research and evidence that those in sort of low socioeconomic environments have higher level of prevalence of obesity because of this exact fact.
The other part of that is it only takes 2 absorbent pieces of paper to squeeze the shizzle out of a hamburger or squeeze the shizzle out of a sausage, and all the fat comes flying out. So I used to habitually do that by sort of the cheaper hamburgers and stuff like that, and just squeeze it with 2 absorbent. If you can't even afford that, like, a bit of toilet paper, and so much fat comes out of those things, and the fat's on the paper, and it's not on the burger anymore. So there are shortcuts around this sort of stuff as well. Like for somebody who's overweight now, that sounds crazy. I should have seen the fat.
Mate, you're at that age where you can sort of tip and be like, oh, well, my best years are behind me. See you later, aren't you?
Well, that's right. I've given up. I don't have to impress anyone anymore. So I can just let myself go is the term, isn't it? I can just undo another belt buckle on my belt and just tuck right in, puppy.
That fat squeezing life hack brought to you by Daddy Eats Last.
But Ryan, you are right, and like it is easy to kind of talk about X and talk about Y, and we do cook a lot of food. We'll have takeaway once a week, and we cook a lot of food, even something as simple as spaghetti bolognese, just with half decent mince and throwing some carrot and zucchini in there to spend less on the mince as well. So there's a cost saving on that, as opposed to, I guess, paying $15 or $20 a kilo for mince. We'll throw a carrot in there, which is like $1 a kilo. So there's different ways you can manage that pricing point as well if you're a little bit creative about the sort of stuff. And again, try to sneak some vegetables into, especially kids' diets who are a little bit skeptical when you serve up, a bit of broccoli or a bit of pumpkin on the side of their plate.
Yeah, it really does come down to, I mean, you certainly can do it, but it's an effort component, and you've definitely got to want to. I mean, one of the best things that I heard was to stay fit and healthy. It's not important to do it on the days that you want to, but you have to do it on the days that you don't want to, because that's what actually keeps you fit and healthy. But I've noticed since we moved to, I mean, we're definitely not suburbia. We are right in the thick of it, in Melbourne, where we live. I've noticed that we are definitely getting takeaway more, and that not bad takeaway all the time, but we'll eat out more or we'll do that because there is just so much choice around, and you kind of go, it's a long day and I can't really be bothered cooking. And we've even spoken about that, TK and I, that at the moment, because it's that kind of end of the year sort of time, and you do a lot of festive things, and eating's usually not the best thing at this time, but yeah, we're actually really having to make a conscious effort not to eat out as much.
Makes a lot of sense, Matthew. What about you and Kim and the family up there? How often do you eat out on a weekly basis, if at all?
Yeah, we definitely at least once a week. But it tends to be. Kim's not a big fan of the chain fast foods. The probably worst thing we probably have is grilled, and we give the girls that as well. And then it might be a Thai every now and then. But we sort of make our own pizzas at home. We don't really get pizzas bought. And yeah, the rest of it's like you can spaghetti bolognese, or we've Kim's invested in some like veggie smuggler cookbooks, so we try and smuggle as much as we can in to get these girls eating, because like you said, anything green they see on the plate is they sort of try and run away. But yeah, it's definitely like you both have said, it's a want. Have to want to be able to give your kids healthy food and contribute in the best way you can.
And the other part of that is the challenge of getting the food into them, like you mentioned there, Matt. Like they'll turn their nose up on X and could get thrown on the floor or just mashed on the tray table or something like that. So there's a component of you might have all the good intentions of the world of serving up the kid this meal, and it's a really healthy meal, and the kid just goes, nah, not today, and then you end up giving them a cheesy mac anyway. So it's all swings and roundabouts, and sometimes you just need to get some sort of nutrition into them so they'll ideally sleep. But kids make it a hell of a lot harder to get food into them, and then also have time to get a decent feed into your face as well.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well there, in that you've got to want it, but also something that I do find in the health space is people can be a bit too harsh on themselves with this kind of stuff. So you got to acknowledge that if you have let yourself go a little bit or whatnot, it's not going to change overnight. And going cold turkey, so Kane, you can have that one chocolate bar once in a while, but going cold turkey and really beating yourself up over it usually leads to things like binge eating and those sorts of behaviors. So you've also got to cut yourself a little bit of a slack with it. And like all good things in life, I just think it's just around balance.
That's right, balance and consistency. Just like fish and chips, guys, we mentioned a lot of takeaways tonight. So just like fish and chips, that just about wraps it up for this week. Do subscribe to Daddy Eats Last on iTunes, and thanks for listening this week. We'll be back next week for another episode, or should I say serving, which is a very apt analogy of Daddy Eats Last. How's that for a dad joke? Catch you next week.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.